The Moon Knight series took the movie industry like a storm, with millions of fans hooked on several levels with the cast, fight scenes, and intense plot. However, since the last episode was released, we've managed to get some updates about your favorite show, which will definitely interest you. Watch the video to the end so that you don't miss a thing. First up, Moon Knight's original set. You must be aware that the show is set entirely outside of the United States, in places like London and Cairo, amongst others. However, as it turns out, there were a few different versions of the Moon Knight's scripts that took place in New York City and included the eponymous vigilante. During an episode of Marvel Studios Assembled that showed behind the scenes development of the series, Oscar Isaac stated that the first screenplays had storylines taking place in New York City before the setting was shifted to London and beyond. Isaac remarked, "I got sent some scripts of the early episodes and I noticed that the tale had been transplanted from New York to London, but the characters were still written as American. As of now, we don't know why the producers or directors decided to change their minds about the location. Did they encounter some problems while trying to film in the US? I'd like to hear what you think in the comments section below." Earlier this year, Diab gave an interview to SFX magazine in which he claimed that, "If you ask me, I would tell you that Moon Knight is here to stay. He has a unique and intriguing personality. Unfortunately, he wasn't questioned about the location change, so I guess we'll have to wait a while before we might find out." Now that we're done with that, it's time we talk about all the most popular questions fans have been asking after watching season 1. So, who is Marc's mother and where is his father? Asylum, the 5th episode, takes viewers on an emotional roller coaster as it delves into the history of Marc and the circumstances that led to the development of his dissociative identity disorder. The episode disclosed that Marc's mother despised him for being kind of responsible for the passing of his younger brother and even resorted to assaulting him, which most likely led to the development of his condition, as well as rise to the popularity of Stephen Grant. Elias, Marc's father, attempted to bring his family together at this difficult time by mediating the conflict that was occurring inside them. Nevertheless, his efforts were fruitless. Lots of fans felt sorry for Elias because he loved and supported Marc when his wife could not, and because he was forced to put the pieces of his shattered family back together again. The last time viewers saw him was in the flashback scene that took place at the memorial for Marc's mother. However, it's unknown if Marc had stayed in contact with his father. Next, was Layla able to keep her role as Tawit's avatar? Layla was a pivotal figure in the Moon Knight story because she served not just as Marc's wife, but also a trusted ally to him. Obviously, she was involved in a fair amount of action, whether it was vanquishing a mummy or outwitting mercenaries. The conclusion represented Layla's abilities as an archaeologist, which she has demonstrated to be particularly badass throughout the series. After following in Marc's footsteps, Layla became Tawit's avatar and received a significant improvement that was reminiscent of Wonder Woman. Because she was being referred to as the Egyptian superhero, it was an exciting and unexpected moment for representation involving Moon Knight. However, Layla made it clear more than once that she had no desire in being used as an avatar, and the only reason Tawret was able to convince her to do so was because of the huge stakes. The conclusion did not make clear whether Tawret eventually left Layla's body or if Layla continued to act as her avatar. This is because the ending was intentionally left ambiguous. I guess we'll find out in season 2. And now, could Layla get in touch with her father? In spite of the fact that it's unknown where Layla had been after the action-packed battle, it is possible that the series has dropped hints regarding Layla perhaps reuniting with her father. It was revealed in the 4th episode that Layla's father was killed by mercenaries and that Marc was the last person to see him before he passed away. Despite marrying Layla, Marc continued to conceal this information from her. Tawret eventually revealed that she had a brief encounter with her father before the mayhem in Egypt forced them to flee their home. The conclusion of the series hinted that this won't be the end of the Moon Knight story, so some viewers are wondering whether the references to Layla's father open the door to future storylines, and whether it's possible that Layla will conduct a spiritual search for her father in order to find some sense of resolution. So, why are Marc and Stephen so oblivious to the Jake Lockley situation? Perhaps the most shocking information was revealed when Jake Lockley, the third personality, made his long-awaited debut. As Marc and Stephen endured multiple blackouts, there were several cryptic clues that pointed to the identification of a potentially harmful individual. They observed the gory aftermath of the events after they regained consciousness, but they were unable to determine what caused the strange incidents. Because they sleep with them themselves tied to a sling every night. Marc and Steven must be aware of Jake Lockley on some level, even if it's only subconsciously. However, neither of them has ever admitted that there is a third personality, which raises concerns regarding whether or not they are aware of Jake's existence. The dramatic scenario that takes place after the credits have rolled naturally gives the impression that this is just the beginning of their narrative and paves the way for future storylines that will involve Jake as well as other tensions between the personalities. Next, what becomes of Marc and Steven at this point? At this point, Marc and Steven have worked out their issues with one another as brothers and believe that they are free from Khonshu's influence. The final scene depicts Marc and Steven making their way back to Steven's apartment in London, despite the fact that Steven is still tying himself up with a sling. Khonshu, of course, did not live up to the end of his bargain with Marc and Steven and lied to them about the transaction. Even though he still has control over them as his avatar, the question that needs to be answered is whether or not Marc and Steven will discover the lie at some point. Given the sudden shift in location and the possibility of a gap between them, it's not clear what Marc and Steven's standing is with Layla at this point. If anything, they continue to live in a vacuum with a great deal of uncertainty regarding their future and the futures of those around them. And now, is it over for Arthur Harrow and Amit? The main antagonist of the show was Arthur Harrow, who was the head of a religious sect called the Disciples of Amit. Ethan Hawke gave a chilling performance as the cult leader, and the character developed impressively over the course of the first few episodes. Naturally, his villainous arc slowed down, leading up to the conclusion, and it seemed like his demise came about rather quickly. After the credits rolled, a scene was shown that revealed that Jake Lockley presumably killed Arthur because it was the only way to get rid of Amit. The fact that his supposed death was never shown on screen, however, leaves open the possibility that Arthur is, in fact, still alive. In spite of this, the swift execution of Arthur and Amit has caused some viewers to scratch their heads and wonder whether that was it for either character. This is due to the fact that both of their character arcs have reached a point where they no longer have the potential to be involved in additional storylines. So, how does the plot fit in with the rest of the MCU? Even though Moon Knight tells the story of how the titular character came to be, many people are curious about how he would work within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Despite the fact that the MCU's most recent path has been centered on cosmology and the multiverse, the series continues to exist independently of the larger conflict that is taking place. Many fans are interested to know whether or not Moon Knight will interact with other Marvel Cinematic Universe characters in order to deepen the mythology. However, Khonshu has plans that suggest Moon Knight's story will diverge from the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In addition, some fans are curious about how the addition of Moon Knight might influence the Marvel Cinematic Universe and where they could see him next. Finally, is there a possibility that there will be a second season or a movie? Considering the fact that a lot of viewers became emotionally invested in Marc and Steven over the course of these episodes, this is probably the most pressing concern raised by the conclusion of the series. People will, of course, be interested in watching more of Moon Knight in action. Thankfully, the final few minutes of the series, as well as the post-credits sequence, hint that Moon Knight will not disappear completely after this installment. Despite this, the question of when and where he will appear next remains unanswered. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.